more risks in China. We see Evergrande's Contagion spreading. It's completely out of the news. There was a massive 2-day spike when Evergrande was the biggest story of all time. It was going to take down the global monetary system, and then it went away. But Evergrande and China is still believing in impact. So what's happening today, Justin?
Well, so there was an article that was talked about a little earlier today. It came from Zero Hedge. Basically, the Chinese junk bonds are selling off. Just a fancy way of saying that.
At all-time highs, it's 20% yield on a junk bond.
Yep. And just for anyone who's kind of new to the bond world, when you see the interest rates on bonds increase with the yield on bonds increase, that typically suggests that people don't want them, or that people are selling them. So kind of the takeaway from this is that people who otherwise could sell Chinese real estate junk bonds do not want Chinese real estate junk bonds, and they're taking whatever they can take in order to get rid of them. And when they do that, that means the implied value, the implied interest rate on the implied yield goes up on the bond. But it's interesting because you get back to this concept of contagion, and Josh, I honestly don't know what to make of this. I mean, I can say the obvious.
It was Asia. It was a company, the 25th largest real estate developer, something like that. They went bust. They had like $1 billion market cap. They just failed on a payment, and that's just we've seen this with so much of Chinese property sector. And then you have the risks with iron taking a hit, some other commodities, which is partially due to the fact that China imports such a massive amount of the global commodity demand, which if the property sector's taking a hit, then they're not going to be buying as many commodities.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is to keep it really, really high level, because again, like this is uncharted territory for me, and I don't know if I have any, particular insight, that I can, share, or, that will be worth anything for anyone. But what I will note is this: is that if liquidity dries up in the Chinese bond market or the real estate bond market, I don't know what the events of that are going to cascade to. So it's just a fancy way of saying if nobody wants to buy, or there's no market for Chinese real estate bonds to be sold in, they're going to go to zero, or the yield will go to infinite. And at the same time, if all this occurs within the Chinese economy, or inside the economy that can be managed by the People's Bank of China, that would be one thing. But I don't know how the impacts are going to cascade if, let's say, China was or if companies or the Chinese economy in general needed to sell these bonds outside the closed loop of the Chinese renminbi, because in that situation, that means that they need foreign currency reserves to come in to to buy whatever, to buy imports and so on. Yeah, and if they can't get that, they've got a problem.
I don't know. I'd give you some pushback there, because right now China's acting as a lot more capitalist than the U.S. actually letting these companies fail. Do you think the U.S. would have let Evergrande fail? If China really is going to let these issues prevail, I'm much more concerned with the Chinese banking system and the repo market, because the banks, they have loaned to these companies, that is for sure. And they are taking a hit if they go bust. Now what happens if they have like a Bear Stearns event, a Lehman Brothers, and one of the banks go down? What is the central bank of China going to do then? Are they going to continue to let the carnage just continue? And that is really where we could see some massive devastations to the global monetary system if they let the Chinese banks go down, which transact so much in the repo market with other global.
Gotcha. So just making some notes here, Josh. So to the first question of, are they more or less capitalist than the United States? What I would say is they're less, but don't be confused with, pockets every now and then to
well, I would say right now they're acting capitalist to follow their Marxist goal of letting capitalism reach peak stage to where then they can take over the communism, the true Marxist view. And if they're going to let the system get flushed out of capitalism for the next few years, I'm not sure if they're just they might let everyone fail and then try and build it back with their communist views. I'm not saying that that's my base case, because I don't think they will let a lot of these entities fail, but I don't think the U.S. would really let anyone fail.
Yeah, well, what I would do is I would look back to 2007, 2008, when the government bailed out Fannie and Freddie. So I mean, you could say the U.S. kind of was already in this, or it had a similar come to Jesus moment, and that's the path that we chose, for better or for worse. So there's that. Um, but as far as a currency crisis goes within China, I think that I think you're absolutely correct. If you start from this concept that politicians always want to increase power, and if you also start from the concept that I suspect, and I cannot prove, but this is again, my guess, that the CCP, they just simply want to increase power and hold on to power at whatever cost. And it might be preferable for them just to watch the world burn than to admit they were wrong or made a mistake. So along those lines, if let's say you see a crisis happening, or let's say you see contagion suddenly start, my suspicion is that you would have probably covertly, if not overtly, the tap on the shoulder from the party official to the CEO of the bank or whatever, saying, "Listen, we really want this course of action to happen," or in other words, we really want you to continue to extend credit. And if you don't continue to extend credit, we'll jackmaw your ass and take you to the re-education camp, and your successor will forget the message and do what we need to do. So I don't know how that will play out. But the way I try to think about this is that you have what goes on within the Chinese economy. I want to say Chinese economy, that is what goes on under the purview of the People's Bank of China, and what goes on outside the purview of the People's Bank of China. And I think it's much easier for China to cheat within its border, within its financial borders, than outside its financial borders. And I guess Joshua, that's probably the only thing I can say, which is
All right.
somewhat marginally
Well, let's
insightful
take that a
for
step
that.
further. So we see Chinese junk debt shooting up to 20%. Just to put some numbers on this, I mean, it was down around 5% a few months ago. So it is quite literally went to the moon, which is very bad for the holders. But who is a holder of corporate debt, triple A rated and above, is Tether. And Tether is a massive portion of Bitcoin's volume. With every transaction going into Bitcoin, Tether is allowing that to happen through USD, whatever it's called. But Tether owns corporate debt, and they have not denied owning Chinese triple A and above rated bonds. So if these Chinese sectors start to come down, their bond market's going to shoot up, and Tether is going to take a massive hit. We already know that Tether used to state that they were backed 1-to-1 by dollars, but we know that they're not, and they own just debt, like triple A rated debt from Chinese companies or U.S. companies that just have massive amounts of risk. So what if we see a 2008 situation where these bonds just straight up default? Tether is going to have a massive issue ahead of them.
Yeah, but see, the thing with Tether, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit before, that I think is you also have to bear in mind is, so I think there's things that people who don't think there's anything wrong with Tether need to understand, and likewise there's things that the people who think Tether's a Ponzi scheme, things that they also need to understand. And here's what I mean by this. On one hand, so let's just say that theoretically people believe that you can redeem a Tether for $1. We've looked to the fine print. The way to redeem a actual Tether for $1, it's pretty damn complicated. I don't even know how to do it. But my point is that there's some roadblocks, to be rather generous, between the path from Tethers turning into dollars actually occurring. And so let's just say that out of all the potential Tethers that are in existence, only 2% are held by institutions who are legally able, or who have the sophistication, shall we say, to redeem Tethers for dollars. Well, if Tether's only sitting on 3% cash reserves, 3% can go for 2% with a 1% buffer. They're going to be fine in terms of that, because no one's going to be able to call for bluff. You and I can't redeem Tethers for dollars. Now, you and I could lose confidence in Tether. More on that in a second. But the point is that, I think that at least I think Tether's going to be a little bit more resilient than people give it credit for, but it's not to say Tether's not going to have issues. What I think the crypto guys who kind of don't think it's a problem, what they don't acknowledge is that if confidence were to be lost in Tether, one for a real reason, for an imagined reason, it doesn't matter. If confidence is lost,
because I believe someday Tether will blow up. All Ponzi schemes come to an end, and from all the research I've done, I am stating that I believe Tether is a Ponzi scheme. And will I be disproven someday? Maybe, but that is for the future to decide.
if people want to get out of the dollar and they go into what they think will be either an inflation or a deflationary asset in crypto or a neutralish asset when it comes to inflation or deflation in crypto. And then they see the numbers go up. What you have to, or what they have to account for is they have to account for the inflationary effect of tethers being a substitute for dollars being printed just to buy up the price of whatever asset, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever, that they're going into. And the other thing too, I think people need to consider is that if people lose confidence in Tether trades in crypto account for, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but what is it? At least half, 70% of all exchange pairs out there. If you suddenly lose that, you're gonna have a real issue. And I don't think the crypto guys really appreciate that. Now, perhaps we'll just sit by and let the storm pass. And it might take, a year. I mean, 2017 will ever good. It might take, a year, 2 years for the storm to pass. Things will probably bounce back to normal. But either way, I think that there's more to Tether than Tether's a big enough problem where people just can't ignore it. But at the same time, too, if people think that a cash redemption is going to be the death of Tether, I don't know if I agree with that either, just because I don't actually know who can redeem, or I suspect the people who can actually redeem Tether are quite small. And if that number is small enough, and that number's under the cash reserves that Tether has, Tether can come out and say, we've never felt a cash redemption, which will technically be true.
Justin, anything else to add?
Nope, just the winning lottery numbers and the meaning of life. But I'll tell it to you later. Next video.